Ladies, gentlemen, scholars and critics, and all of you who are joining us at home to these hollow halls of intellect, welcome to Campus Debates. I am your host for tonight, Abigail Wairimo. Yes, Abigail, not Ivy, because just like any other great debater, let's say Ivy has embarked on an intellectual quest to further her skills so she can bring up a better experience for you watching us at home. Otherwise, I'll hold down the fort. And just like any other night, get ready to enact in a purely intellectual quest. Get ready to be submerged in a conversation of discourse about trending topics in societies today, most importantly, from the point of view of campus students never heard before. And with that said, help me in welcoming our participants for today, who are not only masters of the mic, but maestros of the mind. From side proposition, I give you Mashaya Njuguna from Strathmore University and Mohammed Abdullahi from the University of Nairobi. Give them a round of applause. And taking on these two great debaters, I give you two ladies who are as beautiful and they are smart. Give a round of applause from Team USIU, our host institution for today. I give you Chantel Mukavi and Fresha Diana. Come on, don't sit. Come on. Give the people a chance to know you. Come on. Come forward. You can't be shy and you're a debater. I don't think those two things go hand in hand. Okay, so I don't think most people know this, but Mashaya Njuguna right here is what we in the debate community call an OG debater. Mashaya is the one who founded Strathmore Debate Society. Give him a round of applause. Mashaya, when you founded Strathmore Debate Society, I won't say how long ago, they don't need to know how long ago it was. Did you really, is this what you had in mind, to see debate being offered on a national platform or national television?
This is a huge milestone, I think, for the vision of debate, which was to make it accessible to everyone and to allow people to have these conversations, not just in universities, but also in their homes and wherever they are. So this was the vision, an accessible platform where everyone can enjoy and engage in debates.
Well, you heard it from an OG, an accessible platform, which is exactly what Campus Debates is about. It's about giving you a chance to see what we think about the things that affect us every day in our lives. On this other side, Fresha, I believe congratulations are in order. I hear you're about to be a graduate of USIU University. Let me ask. Now that you're stepping out of, let's say, the comfort of being a university student and into the world of adulting and taxes and things like that, what's the one thing you're going to miss the most about being a student?
Traveling for free in debates, because I existed within my school motto, education to take you places. So I very much enjoyed existing and being a debater.
Well, she said her motto, education to take you places. All right, no, take a seat. All right, so speaking of education taking you places, if you are connected to mainstream media or even social media in any way, shape or form, you know that right now the president has made a rather bold action by reshuffling his cabinet ministers following some claims that have been made by underperformance. This is something that hasn't necessarily been seen before in the realm of the executive arm of the government in our state. And for that reason, we would like to know, and our motion before this house today is, debaters, this house, as a Kenyan citizen, would prefer the president fires cabinet ministers who do not perform instead of reshuffling them. Now that we've met our participants, allow me to introduce the panel that will be heading the conversation tonight. Seated right front and center, we have our chair, Mr. Elijah Bakari. Round of applause, please. Joining him as a panelist, we have Mr. Paul Kitui. And then lastly, we have the wonderful Miss Farisa Machemba. With that said, I think I can comfortably welcome the first speaker of the proposition to give his speech. Here, here.
Starting in 3, 2, 1, go. There's a general consensus among intellectuals and the public today that this is probably the most ineffective cabinet that we have seen in the last 20 years. It is a time for us to act now, and otherwise, if we do not act now, we risk losing the next 5 to 10 years of development as a state. In my speech, we're going to be showing you two things in our arguments. Firstly, why firing is the best strategy to deal with ineffectiveness in government. And secondly, we're going to be showing you why the reshuffling that they're going to be talking about largely cannot work. Firstly, let me set up the framing and the contextualization of this debate with 4 layers. Layer number 1, most of the time, these people have signed performance contracts. Therefore, we have a justification for firing them to the extent they don't meet certain key performance indicators in those performance contracts. Secondly, most of the time, you're going to be given time. The president's most recent reshuffle has happened almost a year after election. So nobody can complain and say they were not given time to be able to show their effectiveness as a cabinet minister. Thirdly, and most importantly, most of these metrics are going to be objective metrics and not subjective ones. Because if you're the Minister of Finance, you have a key performance indicator to reduce the budget deficit. If you're the Trade Minister, is the FDI and the GDP increasing? If you're the Agriculture Minister, is food production increasing? So you cannot say that you're going to be politicized or this is going to become a political affair, because your role as a minister is as a head of an organization, and that organization has objective metrics it must meet. And the last thing I want to say in the framing is that key performance or effectiveness in government is not just about producing, but also preventing loss. So what we'd like to say is that a lack of performance also includes resource leakages within governments, issues to do with corruption, issues to do with mismanagement of funds, which is probably the most endemic problem facing the governments today, and that is what the role of ministers is to fix that. In my first argument, I'm going to be showing you why firing them is the best method to deal with this. First point of argumentation. I'm going to say that to a great extent, government ministries are no different from private companies. These people or these are organizations that necessarily are headed by these ministers. And these ministers are at the top of that organization. What is the role of a minister or somebody who is at the head of organization? I'm only going to give 2 which are important to this debate. Firstly, they are important, or their role is to make sure that the culture of the organization is positive, that people are working, that these organizations are effective, and people are doing what they need to do. And secondly, they are tasked with the responsibility of managing the resources within these organizations. At a point where you are failing at both of these roles, to ensure that the culture of government workers is to ensure effective service delivery, at a point where resource leakages are the story of the day, you have no business being a minister at that point, because this is a task that has been given to you by the Kenyan people, and you're necessarily failing. So we prefer to know that we are under the leadership of those who are the best at managing these two, because one, as a minister, you are at the highest level of this organization, and this organization has an impact on millions of Kenyans' lives. Your failure is going to be very expensive on people's lives. So at a point where you're not going to be able to do this role well, we say that these organizations must change. And here is the intuition. Organizations rot at the top. At a point where the culture of the ministry is sluggish, at a point where resource mismanagement is the order of the day, this is a reflection on your identity as a minister and your ability to perform at that level. So what we say is that when the ministry is failing, you as the leader must step down and move away. That's the first layer. The organization needs to have effective leadership at the top to prevent the trickle-down rotting of the entire organization. For years, we have allowed leaders who are doing nothing to stay at the top, which is why the government cannot operate today. The culture is rotten. We must change it now. The second thing we then say at that point is that these people have signed performance contracts. They have a standard to meet, and that standard has been set for them. They are bound by these contracts. A failure to meet those key performance indicators means you must step down, because you are violating your own contract by not ensuring that the things that you said you were going to do are not going to happen. 2, you have taken an oath of office. Not only have you signed a contract, but sworn to God and the people that you're going to do your best to ensure that you meet certain key performance indicators. At a point where you're failing, a reshuffling does not solve
of that problem. We must deal with the people and remove them so that we get people who are willing to do the job. This is the order of the day in the most effective governments that exist in this world. Look at this situation. In the UK, we had a leader, Theresa May. They were supposed to deliver Brexit. She failed. They brought Boris Johnson. He could not deliver Brexit. He failed. They brought Liz Truss. I think she stayed 2 weeks. Couldn't and said, this job is too much for me. Stepped down. Now we have another person. This is the culture. The Netherlands government failed on immigration policy. The Prime Minister had to step down. As the leader of the organization, at a point where you are unable to deliver on your key performance indicators and your performance contract, you have no business pretending you can do it later. Step down, let those who have the capacity to come and do it, and that's what we believe. The third thing then we say is that the process of hiring and firing ought to be an issue of meritocracy. Those people who exist are ready, and there are people out there who are ready and willing to step up. Even these campus students, they can go and do that job better than them. We have graduates without jobs. There are people who can do these jobs. So at a point where we ensure that the culture is not one of meritocracy, where we allow people who are failing to remain within these positions, we say that they must come, or we must have a situation where those who fail step down and those who are doing well stand up. What is the impact of this? Improvement in service delivery and effectiveness, because people are constantly on their toes. When you know at the back of your mind there are consequences for failure, you have an incentive to do better. You have an incentive to work harder. And if these people are just reshuffled, that incentive is taken away. You have no incentive because you know you're going to just get a soft landing, maybe in another ministry somewhere, which is a failure. We believe that at that point, firing is the only legitimate cause to ensure effective service delivery, and the culture of sluggishness must change. In my last 15 seconds, I'm going to be talking about something about resource leakages. At a point where the biggest problem with governments today is the mismanagement of resources. Our president said we lose 2 billion a day. David Lee recently on television said that wastage in government is rampant. The problem we must be dealing is plugging resource gaps. What we say is that a failure in performance is not just about creating. As the CEO, your responsibility is not just to make sure the company is running well, but that the company is not losing money. The same with ministers. When we lose money every day, these people are sluggish in dealing with these problems. We believe that at a point where these people are aware that loss of resources means you're going to lose your job, there's an incentive for them to fight these problems of mismanagement of resources and corruption. My deputy will speak more about this. In the end, there's no better way of dealing with this problem than to remove those who are not doing their jobs properly. Thank you.
Well, I did tell you he is the maestro of minds. And after such a powerful opening, let's see what the first speaker of side opposition will have to counter. Hear, hear.
I'll be beginning my speech in 3, 2, 1. Key clarity that lack from the side proposition is that they failed to set up a framing of how cabinet ministers are actually appointed within the Kenyan government. And why is this important? You need to understand the bureaucracy and functionality of how one becomes a cabinet minister, therefore warranting why it will be a tedious process to fire them and hire new ones. Now, coming from side opposition, why do we seek the reshuffling instead of firing? We need to understand that the long, tedious process of how we pick and nominate cabinet secretaries before they're even assented by the president comes from the legislative arm of the government, that is the National Assembly. Now, why is this important? We need to show that the quality of ministers is likely to be the same even with the hiring and firing of these ministers, because it's based off of bureaucracy of people who are not necessarily within the system. So why then do we believe that existing within the same system is better off in our side of the house? As I've shown you, the quality of ministers is likely to remain the same because we are offering them an opportunity just in different sectors to evolve their skills, because firing them means a long, tedious process of having to start assessing personalities, soft and hard skill, team and work dynamics, which is very problematic for a state, particularly the public sector. The public sector is a very vital role and a very vital arm of the government. Excuse me, a very vital arm of the government, because it shows how the government works. The executive arm branch of the government, that is the cabinet secretary, is the key frame of what a government constitutes. Now, with this type of framing, it leads now to us what reshuffling would look like in our side of the house. The problem that we face in our side of the house is that we need to ensure competency grows. As we've shown you already, quality is likely to be the same within this metric. Now, the process will be less tedious and less bureaucratic because they're already in the system, thereby reshuffling them into different sectors, per se saying remove the Minister of Forestry into the Ministry of Trade. That would essentially work in the sense that they're getting exposure to a different environment and likely to grow their mind and give a comparison element in a new environment where they can work better as opposed to just firing them. Now, what backlash would lead to this firing? Likely it will be a bad thing within the society because it will destabilize the state for one, and endanger the accuracy and performance, which means destabilization of the government and how it's working. Because as I've shown you, the executive arm of the branch is the key source of how a state functions. Now, why is this important to frame, to be very important to a Kenyan citizen to understand this? A Kenyan citizen essentially stands for someone who's protected by the government and the government is working for them. That essentially this would not be the need or this would not be the choice they would have their president take on their behalf, since the president is making the decisions on their behalf. In light of all this, as he take the model of the UK, Brexit failed. They hired and fired prime ministers as someone who even only took 2 weeks in office and quit the job. That shows you that the performance indicators on their side is likely to be less accurate with this hiring and constant firing of people just because you're telling me I'll be fired if I am incompetent. Now, the harms of firing the cabinet ministers prove to be now a dysfunctional state. Now, why does this look? How does this look? It reflects on the public sectors having no ability to reform and taking away from an average citizen who would like to apply for a job within the public sector and diffuse and and create a whole lot of confusion. I'll take your point.
How does using the same people who are rotten and are creating an effective system going to reform the same system? You cannot use the same people to reform a system that is already broken.
I have already showed you how the bureaucratic system of Kenya works and highly likely why it would be the quality would be the same. Therefore, hiring and firing would be just hiring the same people of the same breed or quality that you're still looking for. We are not in a technocratic state. Kindly note that. Now, another key thing that you need to understand as to why our actors are very important in this debate. Citizens always want a stable state. And with that said, why would they necessarily act with the mind that they'd support their president to reshuffle as opposed to firing? First of all, they need stability. And second of all, they need opportunity. Now, why is this important? It will set precedents as to how public sectors should be run, because the trickle-down effect, as he says, to low-level jobs affect the policies to the menial of low-level workers who want to apply within the public sectors. Now, we already show you that we need an interest. The interest of the citizen is to create job retention. And with regards to now COVID-19 happening, we had a lot of dynamics in employment and therefore showing how human beings are indispensable. With this sort of policy being run within the society, it shows that the government will just hire and fire you at will, and that's very problematic and chaotic to destabilize the state's GDP necessarily for particular cabinet ministries, as I've shown you why this executive arm of the branch is core to how a state runs. Ensuring some form of stability is what we seek on our side of the house, that we would rather exist with the reshuffling, whereby we can have a little bit of accuracy and a little bit of sustainability and stability within how our government runs and how our government performs. Now, in that sense, we need to show you that on their side of the house, we are trying to create a stable environment where I, as a Kenyan citizen, feel safe, knowing that if I walk into the government and I'm assured of some form of employment, because employment is it's a very critical issue within the society. Now, why then would I want to not exist within a society that provides for me, as opposed to just living under the fear of being fired at moment's notice without even given a chance to readjust. Thank you.
Well, we are halfway through the debate and we are seeing two very contrasting points of view. On one side, we have side proposition telling you if it doesn't work, take it away, find something that works better. He tells you that it's going to poison the ministry and you'd rather do away with it than try and fix it. On the other side, you have side opposition telling you, but you're getting the same people from the same pool, so what exactly are you fixing by constantly hiring and firing? Engage with us on our Twitter handle and let us know what you know of the motion so far and what your thoughts are on the same. We'll be back after a short break. Hello, hello, and welcome back to Campus Debates. All right, so in the first half, we had some pretty brilliant points, and we had come to some kind of impasse with our speakers. Now, here to give the final set of rebuttals for their teams, I give you the second speaker from Team Proposition. Here.
So panel, there is an assumption on team opposition that if we fire and we hire new people, we'll just get the same crop of people back in office. We'll try and show you that our proposition, or at least what we propose here, which is firing, gives us a higher likelihood of an improvement in service delivery, in improvement in performance and all of those things. Even if it's a marginal increase, panel, we will try and show you that you will likelihood get it on our side as opposed to theirs. But before that, a few rebuttals. Panel, Fresher argues that the process is tedious, the process takes a long time, please do not take us through it again. Panel, the process is not that tedious. One, they've been in office for a year and 1 month. The government was voted in August. So that means we had a cabinet by September. No, it does not take as long as she wants. But beyond that, assuming that it took long as she wants us to believe, panel, should we stick with the same crop of incompetent people because the process is tedious and long? Should we keep the same people in office because we do not want to go through this long and tedious process? Panel, we tell you, one, the process is not that tedious, as she argues. Secondly, even if it was tedious, as she argues, we would prefer to go through that because what we value more is one that produces competent and people who are performing as opposed to keeping the same people in office. Panel. Secondly, she argues that once we reshuffle them and we transfer them, we are going to transfer them in a position, at least in a department that suits their skills better. Panel. The president nominated these 20 people. He knew what fits their skill the first time he was nominating them. They failed in that panel. What is this new magical realization that if he failed in foreign affairs, he's going to magically perform in tourism panel? Nothing, panel. It doesn't work like that, panel. But assuming that that was even a possibility, panel, what is the role of a cabinet minister panel? The role is majorly the same across the entire department. It is strategic, it's policy, it is a formulation of guidelines and all of those things. It remains the same thing, panel. It does not change. Technicalities are worked on by civil servants who do not change that much, who continue to retain their positions. Panel. Thirdly, she argues that this dynamism, this change is too much, and we think that what it will result in is an unstable government, an unstable employment within the ministries and all of these things. She argues that we're just out of COVID. We do not want to be firing people. Panel, there is a misunderstanding on team opposition that we only have about, or at least we should legally have a maximum of 22 cabinet ministers. Firing 22 cabinet ministers does not increase the unemployment crisis in this country, panel. If anything, it improves the unemployment crisis within this country. Panel, on our substantive matter a little bit. What Macharia told you about is one, that the performance metric that we are going to use is not one that is subjective, that it's a very objective one, that it has metrics. We can tick the boxes. You did not achieve box one. That is why we're firing you. This talk about that it is going to increase stability and all of these things is really far-fetched. Panel, we tell you that why not reshuffle? Panel, we live in unique times. This country is out of 10 years of mismanagement. The economy is in shambles. If anything, this particular time, panel, we have limited resources. Mistakes are costly. In the event that we keep people who keep doing mistakes, who keep misusing resources, panel, especially within these characteristics of unique times, panel, we destine this country for complete chaos, for complete failure. If anything, if there was a time to fire people, this is it. This is the time, panel. Panel, we equally told you why fire. why that is the best, why it is best for social contract, why it is best for the contract we got in with the UDA government, the contract we got in with Mr. Ruto, why the best approach for him to take to make sure that the promises he gave to the people are kept, why he delivers on his mandate, why the promises in his manifesto are kept, is when he fires those people, panel. That is the higher likelihood of a success for the government, of a success for the citizenry, panel. Panel, we equally tell you on the impact that it has on citizens. What do we expect in the event that these people are fired? What happens? Why we as Kenyan citizens prefer a firing over a reshuffle? Panel, we tell you that moving them as team opposition, of course, once is just moving failures. She tells you that the quality will... He failed in Department A. There is hardly any likelihood that he's going to succeed in Department B. Panel, team opposition, again, loves this idea that the KPIs are less accurate, that delivering Brexit is this less accurate idea. Panel, it is not. The British population voted for get us out of the European Union and get us trade deals with the European Union, get us trade deals with the American country, get us trade deals with Africa and all of these things. There is hardly anything inaccurate about that. It is deliver A. You failed to deliver A, get the hell out of office. It is as accurate as it gets, panel. That is as accurate as it gets.
Do you guys remember this thing that used to happen when you were in boarding school during night prep? When a teacher would come peep through the window and say, "You're making noise, you know yourselves, come out." That's basically what Mohammed is saying. The president will tell them, "You know yourselves, you're failing, come out. Let's get the next cohort." Let's see what the opposition has to say in a rebuttal to that. Hear, hear.
I'll take a POI from you guys, like whenever. All right, starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panel, we think the nuances that have been missed in this debate is something that opposition then uses to override all logic and reason and goes ahead to say, well, they're doing bad, so let's punish them. There's a reason why when you have children, you take an approach that is to understand what's going on, that is to find out improvements for that child, rather than going ahead and saying, we're kicking you out of school and sending you to military school. We're going to be tackling two main clashes in this debate. Number one, precedence. Number two, outcome, and that feeds then into sustainability long term. Number one, precedence. What government tells you is that we want a strict culture, sort of like organizational culture, right? When you do something wrong, you're going to get punished. What we tell you on our side comparatively is we want a culture of reform. Why is this specifically important in this motion? This motion, panel, is an actor's motion. They don't seem to acknowledge it's talking about Kenyan citizens. What are the goals of Kenyan citizens for the average Kenyan? Number one, stability. Number two, opportunity. Number three, retention of that opportunity, which is what Fresher tells you. How do we achieve this and how do they not? Number one, stability. The fact that if you continue to change the people who are the leadership, you leave power vacuums. This is exactly what happens in military coups that you see in Niger and all of West Africa, where you struggle to find somebody to replace who left that power vacuum in the first place. They don't really tell us what happens between that lag when you're trying to find the same people. Number two, they admit to us that it's the same president, the same vetting committee that then vets these people in the first place, which means the metrics of vetting don't change, the CV requirements don't change, which means how exactly then are you looking for people who are automatically going to be better in their world when the metrics simply don't change and neither does the procedure? They don't tell us how they'll find saints and Hail Marys in their world rather than continual, perpetual disaster, as Macharia clearly explains, which is what happens in Brexit. Number three, the fact that we seek for then opportunity and retention, right, as Kenyans, which then means that what happens at the top trickles down to the bottom. What the president does at state trickles down all the way in other levels of the public sector, which means that if the president is firing everyone, so will the people at the lower levels of public sector. Why is this important? Because the average Kenyan citizen wants a job, they want opportunities. People are struggling in the country and have been even since way before COVID, right? What culture you instill there is that we are not giving people chances to reform. People, when getting into jobs, they obviously have adjustment issues. They obviously have periods where probably they're not likely going to perform very well. We think that reshuffling sets a precedent from state that says that we are willing to reform, and that is something that should be employed in all sectors of government panel, which means then that if a Kenyan fails to produce some sort of deliverable, it then means that we're automatically giving you a chance to do so in a different sector because we acknowledge the nuances that exist within the situation rather than simply increasing unemployment, which Moha seems to have an issue with. Number three, in looking at retention of that opportunity, look at the UN panel. The UN uses this reshuffling model. You don't get fired in the UN that easily unless it is gross misconduct or criminal behavior, which obviously we're not discussing in this debate. What they do is they reshuffle you to a different department or a different sector, a different project area, knowing that you still have skills that can be used in other areas. Why do they do this? Because number one, job security of their employees. Number two, recognizing that continual feedback increases the accuracy when you transfer people to different jobs, meaning that I might not be accurately placed for this job, but I might be better accurately placed for the next job. And even if I'm not, I keep giving you feedback and the placement becomes more and more accurate over time. But number three, simply just credibility and trust in the system. The reason why people struggle so much to get jobs and compete is because they know that they can be fired at the drop of the dime, which is why people are moving away from private sector and going into government sector and NGO sector. Point.
If the incentive of the political class is to be re-elected and to necessarily deliver to citizens so that they vote them back, why would a president who fires one minister bring back another incompetent one if their incentive is to get people who are going to deliver the services they promised? You're not dealing with that logical gap in your case.
Cool. Then it means that we also need to pose the same question to you guys, because how do you then promise that a new person will deliver better than ours, right? Yeah. We think then, I'm not taking any more, we think that on our part, what happens then is number one, the second clash on outcome, right? Number one, the fact that we have the same people who are doing the same things means that you can't guarantee that impact on your side. But number two, even if our people don't deliver anything in any position they're put into, why are we still better? Well, number one, because we have some sort of stability in government. We don't have power vacuums that are struggling to be filled every other way, right? Number two, the fact that we have some sort of incremental accuracy that leaves a good precedent that is set for the average Kenyan to be able to be retained in the jobs that they get into. But number three, the fact that even if we have very low quality deliverables, it's much better than having zero deliverables on their side because they have power vacuums that they fail to fill and people continue to fail. Lastly, sustainability, and why do we achieve that on our side? We think that for the average Kenyan panel, the presidents directly reflect on their trust in state. This directly reflects on their ability to be politically active. Why we have things like voter apathy, why we have things like people not wanting to participate in discourse that are going on things like Twitter, right? You don't really get that meaningful discourse that happens on the political level. Is simply because they lose trust in the system. They think that the system favors the political elite, and that's why they're not able to actually be retained in the jobs that they actually get into. We think at the point where you continue to fire people and still continue to hire the same political elite who have connections to you anyway, because you're the same people who are hiring them, then it doesn't really change anything on their side. On our side, at least, we have a policy and a culture that seeks to retain Kenyans in the jobs that they are being brought into, even at the point where they don't perform, by continuing to give them a chance to perform in other sectors, leading to better self-actualization at the individual level, but also better credibility for the state at the international level. Never been prouder to oppose.
So that brings us to the end of this debate, at least the first part of it. And my question to you at home and to the audience at large is, do you really think it is justified for a president to fire a cabinet minister only 1 year in a 5-year long term because of grounds of underperformance? Or does it make more sense for him to reshuffle them to see where the skills would better be placed to serve the nation and the government at large? Don't touch that dial. We'll be back in a blink of an eye to hear what the panelists think about the debates that were delivered just now. Hear. back to KTN Home and Campus Debates. So, after nothing short of a battle of the minds, it's time to fall onto the panelists to see what they think and who takes home the championship tonight. While they do that, remember to engage with our Twitter handle at KTN Home. We actually have a poll up currently, and before the judges give us their verdict, go ahead. Stick up a poll, give us your thoughts on the matter, and see whether, if you were taking the stage here at Campus Debates, if you would have won or if you'd have taken home an L. But before they give us their verdict, the speakers on each side will have one final chance to try and sway not only the judges, but also those of you watching at home and those of us in the audience. We'll have a general question which will be asked by the chair and will be posited to both sides of the house, which will be followed by a specific question asked by each of the panelists to each of the sides. Panel, whenever you're ready.
All right. So, to both sides of the house, this is the question. To those of you that say that we should fire them for underperformance, and to those of you that say we should reshuffle them, this firing and this reshuffling, after how long do you think it should be considered? And the timeline you choose, why exactly are you choosing that particular timeline?
Okay, so on the first part of the question, after how long do we think this firing or reshuffling should happen? We say 1 year. So governments generally run on a financial year duration. We think that it should be in line with the financial year. Why do we think it should run concurrently with the financial year? One, we've had time to give you a budget. Second, we've had a time to audit your budget. Third, we think we have had a time, or at least good enough time, for you to propose programs within your ministry, and those programs have gotten budgets. So we'll have a better understanding of, if you said you were going to spend 100 or 200 million building this and it was going to take 1 year, so we'll have that enough time to see, was the 100 million disbursed to your ministry? How was it spent? Is whatever you're trying to build, or is the program successful? And then audit those accounts. Was the 100 million, one, spent efficiently? Second, can you account for every single dollar of that 100 million? Thirdly, do we think that the project at least achieves the impact that we thought it would achieve? That is why we think it should take a year, and those are our reasonings behind it. If I could ask, did the question have a second part to it? Okay, thank you. So, yes, so, sorry. So beyond that, a little bit, especially on team opposition, although this might be relevant. Panel, in your deliberations, please consider, because team opposition highly considers that we should have job stability and security and all of these things. And we ask them this question: why do we think we should primarily prioritize job security for 22 people, job stability for 22 people, over their performance for 60 million Kenyans? Again, we are not talking about firing the entire ministry. We are talking about firing cabinet ministers. We can have a minimum of 14, a maximum of 22. Why should we be so concerned over their job security and stability and all of these things over the need for them to perform and work well for 60 million Kenyans? Unless we get that comparative from team opposition, they are out. Thank you very much.
So in response to the question posed by the judges, first of all, the timeline. For us, we think that it varies according to the timeline given to the project or the task that is due. For example, you could have a project that would take 1 year and the deliverable is that 1 year. You could have a project that would take 1.5 years. You could have one that could take 8 months. We think that the timeline should be flexible enough to vary according to your first and biggest project, and that's how we would decide to weigh you. Why? Number one, we think tracking capacity. Tracking capacity in terms of workload, in terms of how you're moving towards the project deadline, because it does require require sub-planning when you're moving towards a grander project. Number two, tracking adaptability to the environment. Seeing as this is a new role for the person, we want to see how they're able to adapt to things like different teammates, different environments, field work, job work, project, office work, etc. And number three, just because it's simply justifiable to wait until someone has passed the deadline to deliver a certain project so that you can be able to evaluate, is it a fail, is it a pass, and what are the reasons that they failed throughout that timeline, i.e. tracking capacity and tracking adaptability. Now, in response to government's question in terms of why would we prioritize job security for the 22 over millions of Kenyans, we told you quite clearly that it's an issue of precedence, right? The fact that what you do at the top with that job security for those 22 will reflect and trickle down to the policy changes that you're going to see or lack thereof for every other position and level that you see in government or society, especially in the public sector. This then means that the Kenyan at the very bottom who is performing administrative work or secretarial duties or whatever the job might be will directly be influenced by what the president is setting at the top, which then means at the point where they are underperforming in whatever job they are doing, they're automatically going to be fired instead of considering to be reshuffled. Why then do we think reshuffling is a lot likely to then be successful in our world for the average Kenyan than on their world? Number one, we tell you that due to multiple reasons, people are probably not likely going to be able to perform at the level that they should. It could be issues, for example, if you're the average Kenyan, of family duties. It could be medical duties. It could be any issue in regards to personal life. It could be any issue in regards to just adaptability of a new environment and a new job that hinders your performance in some sort of way. It could be adaptability to the system. It could be limitations of the system itself. It could be different reasons that hinder your performance as a Kenyan to be able to produce what you need to. We think that reshuffling requires that Kenyan to be looked at, reflected, and then to at least give them an opportunity to be able to shine in other areas, or to at least be able to provide feedback so that we can see the accuracy of where it is they failed, why they failed, and how we can allow them to continue to progress in other sectors in future. This is a much better model, which the UN also already uses. This is not something coming up from the air, and it is something that has definitely proven to promote job security, to promote morale, and also to promote things like job retention, which are the most important things in a debate like this, rather than simply firing individuals for any number of reasons without actually investigating and evaluating the nuances and trying to find other methods that we can improve the system. Stability would be the most important thing. They don't show you still how they fill the power vacuum, and they don't show you how when they recruit new members, those members are going to magically outperform. They in fact are quite contradictory. They give you a Brexit example that proves our case. Never been prouder to oppose.
Okay. So my question goes expressly to side government. So my question for you is, because some concessions can be made that political parties are formed largely on the basis, not political parties, but cabinets and executives are formed largely on the basis of political loyalty. So wouldn't a simple shake-up suffice, especially considering the people you might risk offending by completely firing might decide I came with some people, some population, so I'll make it even inhospitable for like the administration or the president to govern. So wouldn't a simple shake-up, because of the nature of the paradigm you exist in, suffice, instead of you risking offending people and even making it hard to deliver for the people who are the actor in this motion and their incentives?
My question goes directly to side opposition. You talk of giving the ministers a second chance and use mistakes children make as a way to defend that they need a second chance. But do you recognize that not all situations or circumstances need the mercy of having a second chance?
Thank you so much, Paul, for your question, because I think it speaks to the pathogenesis of this problem, which is trying to put politicians to solve problems that are supposed to be solved by technocrats. So the president already put himself on this bed when he put politicians to be the ones in charge of managing the service delivery. And the question then we say is actually, or the answer to the question is twofold. Number one, the first part of the question is the cabinet is political, so what do you do? In fact, we say when the cabinet is political, this is when you must do it the most. These are not
technocrats. These are not people who are specifically skilled in the delivery of services in specific ministries. Our foreign affairs minister is not an expert in diplomacy. Our trade minister was not an expert in trade. This means that the checks and balances that you give such people need to be higher, because then you follow their culture and move these politicians within different positions. It means they transfer their incompetence to different places. So the first place we must start, and I think this is the place, most of these people are incompetent at their jobs. They are there to serve political interests. So when they fail at that job, at that point, we believe those people even need higher checks and in fact, they are like children. You know the way you give children more rules because you expect them to make more mistakes. We believe at that point, these people not being technocrats and not being specialists in the roles that they have been put means that our checks and balances and our accountability for their jobs must be highest, but the highest point we have ever seen. So yes, we have a political problem where our cabinet is fully political. At that point, the checks and balances must even be higher, because the likelihood of this person not being good at their job is higher. I think that's the situation, or that's the first answer to your question. Secondly, you say that when we remove them, it will lead to political consequences, that there is going to be backlash, or you fired our person, and these people, let's say when you put them there, they had given you some political dividend. They had given you votes. They had given you all these situations. So there are three answers to that question. First answer, this motion is from the perspective of a citizen. A citizen does not care about political dividends. We only care about the performance of these individuals. Whether or not it leads to you receiving political backlash from a specific community is fine, for as long as service delivery improves. Two, it can easily be resolved by replacing them with somebody who fits the same representative metrics this person does. So if you're firing someone from community X and fits this gender profile, you find a more competent person from community X who fits a certain gender profile. So the replacement, unless they are going to argue that there's no availability of options, which I don't think is the case, I think then this solution is there. Third answer to this question is actually this fits the political mold of the current government, which campaigned on the basis of the failures of the past to deliver on certain promises they did. So at a point where you're firing these people for failure of service delivery, then at that point you're actually fulfilling the political interest which you ran on, which is that the current government has failed, they have put us in debt, the economy is in shambles, we are coming to fix that problem. So it is not against the political mold of you as a person, if this debate is going to be judged on politics, for you to then fire people on failure of performance because your entire campaign was that the previous government has underperformed and failed. So at that point, there is a solution there. And to make it even better, it actually is better for your brand, because you look at a man who is actually here and to serve the people and to meet their interests at a point where people are judged on performance. So those are the answers we give to your questions. One, even if the cabinet is political, we must in fact have higher standards. And two, the political backlash is non-issue in this debate, because this debate is being weighed from the perspective of a citizen. Me having food on my table, me having water is more important than which political community is being annoyed. We rest our case.
So, in response to the question as to why it is justified to give them a second chance, kindly note that the context that we gave you is very important, which is who is the hiring power making these people come to cabinet. That's why we would opt for the second chance. If the committee remains the same of the people who are hiring these cabinet ministers, then it is highly unlikely that they'll hire competent people. Therefore, we feel that reshuffling gives you a second chance to put your set skill in a different area, because at the point in which this committee was considering you for cabinet position, they knew your skill set, and that is why they hired you. As even to feed into what Macharia said, it's politically motivated to serve certain interests. So the likelihood of this committee incentivizing them to hire a person who is just going to serve their needs is likely to be the context of which we're existing in. And this debate is likely to say, the context of this debate is based off of competency and incompetency. Therefore, we cannot judge based off of gross misconduct or based off of criminal records. It is based off of competency of the service deliveries that we feel it's justified to give them a second chance to reshuffle them and put their skill set into a different scenario, to provide them a building capacity with a different team and a new environment to be exposed to provide for these needs. We also feel that with the context set, it's important that if they want to provide us change as to warrant hiring, the committee needs to change. Remove the legislative arm of government that works in the committee to approve these cabinet appointments by the president. That is the only way we can seek change. But as for now, we will stick to reshuffling because the quality we've shown you will remain the same and it always serves the interest. Why then should I as a citizen seek for this sort of stability, a little stability, as opposed to no stability at all? Thank you.
Well, that is a wrap for today's debate. I personally feel more comfortable about the fact that there's a mind reader on the panel because I think after those reply speeches, they're definitely going to need the power of the third eye. So, do you think the reply speeches had any way in what the panel is going to say? Did they sway you as the audience? Were you swayed? The audience doesn't seem too sure. I hope you guys at home are more confident than my audience in the house. And I definitely hope that the panel is more secure in their decision. Chair?
All right. So you've had the debate. Now, what the panel has decided. Now, having listened to both sides of the house, I will tell you which side carries the day and give you some justification. Now, having had discussion with the panel, we believe that the winners of this particular debate are Team Government.
All right.
This was a unanimous decision based on these things. Both sides agree that the debate is about competence and incompetence. And here are some of their major arguments and how they represent them. Team Government focuses on the fact that these people are needed to have to do some service delivery and their issues of contracts and performance. While Team Opposition seeks government stability, job security, and possibly giving people a second chance so that those who are in lower positions of employment will also be treated with similar grace. However, as panel, we thought that there is greater weight in what is brought forth by Team Government based off the fact that this is being viewed from the perspective of a citizen who actually just wants service delivery, and that is why they put the government in place. One thing to perhaps highlight that both sides bring up is in their examples. Both sides bring up examples. One predominant example that comes from both sides is the issue of Brexit, as well as the issue of the UN from the other side. Now, considering that this debate specifically is on issues of government, the panel thought that the example of Brexit and how that works, while arguing that these things have worked in other areas, does provide greater weight than comparing it to the UN that is not necessarily an example of a national government. It is for these particular reasons that the panel gave the win to the Team Government.
Well, that is it. Side proposition takes the win. And I will encourage you again to engage with us to our Twitter handle at KTN Home, and maybe a certain someone somewhere who walks around with a very big motorcade is going to catch wind of what the youth think about the decisions he makes, and maybe he might grace us with a visit and perhaps give us a better justification, better than the chair, as to why things work the way they do. Otherwise, those are our 2 cents here on Campus Debate. See you next time, same place, same time. Bye-bye.